Hey, gents, welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad you're here. I know there's a good number of ladies listening to the episodes once in a while as well. This one titled, So Your Wife Wants to Homeschool. I think that's funny. I remember back, Angie and I both weren't for homeschooling in the beginning. Our oldest went to school just briefly for first grade. And it was the private Christian school. It was a fantastic school, but we ended up pulling her out and homeschooling. More on that in a little bit. But, I remember having a lot of concerns about it, definitely wasn't for it. And we just didn't identify as a homeschooling family. And that was a thing I had to wrestle. And I think it had to do with some pride in me, actually, if I look back. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But first of all, thanks so much for listening to the podcast. It really helps when you give a 5-star review on Apple or Google or Spotify. It also really helps when you share the episode. You can just let people know verbally, or you could share it on social media and tag Resolute Man. That would be fantastic. But there's a lot that goes into doing a show in a professional manner to really do it right. And so if you feel compelled to support the ministry, that's amazing too. You can do that by buying Be Courageous coffee at becourageousministry.org, or you could even give there. You can just pray for me and the ministry overall, and that would be amazing. I definitely need the prayer, brother. It's not an easy task to do all the different pieces that the ministry calls for to really make it happen on a weekly basis. And just the commitment to get the show out every week, no matter what. When there's 2 shows and so many other variables, the app and coffee and all the different support, customer support and so forth. I am thankful, by the way, just a quick update, is I do have an assistant now who's doing a great job, but that costs money too, right? So everything you do to support is meaningful. It makes such a difference. So, hey, maybe you're in some different situations here. Maybe you are new to homeschooling. Your wife's saying, hey, I want to homeschool. Maybe you are already doing it, but you want to make sure it's done well, and you have some concerns or still some fears or thoughts about it and want some encouragement. I can definitely relate to some of those. I'm sure that you have in my past, at least. Okay, not anymore. And maybe things are going great, thriving, and you're feeling great about homeschooling, but this will just be some sharpening, and I'm sure you get some wisdom out of this as well. So here's some fears. I'm just going to rattle through these. You can add to the list in your own mind if you want. Maybe I missed one of yours, but here's some definite fears. And I think, almost all of these fears, okay? I want to make sure my kids have a great opportunity. I don't want to do anything that would hurt their future opportunity. I don't know what they're going to be doing in the future, but I want to make sure their foundation in terms of education is so strong they don't miss out on anything, okay? Socialization. I want to make sure my children are socialized. I'm just not sure. I remember feeling this way. I'm just not sure if they're going to be able to communicate effectively and confidently with different people and to be able to build relationships with strong peers and really run the race with them, right? How about the expense of it? It is an extra expense. The state pays for public schools, right? It does not pay for homeschooling. So there's an expense there. That might be something on your mind. How about less time with your wife? If she's already busy, she already feels busy, these are conversations you've already had, now adding homeschooling on top of being busy, am I going to have less time to spend with my bride? That could be a question you have. How about a lack of belief in your wife that she can be the educator? You may not have vocalized this in that exact way, but if you feel that way, your wife probably feels it, okay? Even if you haven't vocalized it. So it's vital. I'll probably do another episode on how to encourage your wife specifically on this, but she needs to feel your belief, and that is incredible. By the way, on all topics, husbands have so much influence on their wives. It's incredible, right? So we'll talk more about that. How about sports? Oh, I grew up doing sports. I really want my kids doing sports, and they're going to miss those really amazing team building opportunities to build character and discipline and all these different things. So that could be an issue. How about the stigma of being a homeschool family, right? Maybe you just don't identify with the look and feel of what it is to be a homeschooling family. Maybe there's some thoughts in your head about that. Hey, I remember having some thoughts about that. I have a story for you. I'm actually going to share my first homeschool conference. I'll share in a few minutes. I really want my children to be well-rounded, and I feel like they're not going to be well-rounded if they're always at home. So that could be a fear. Or what if it's more self-seeking? It's more about your social circle. It might interrupt or detract from the social circle you currently have that has to do with the parents of the kids where your kids currently go to school. So those are all interesting things to think about. Now I'm going to go back through and I want to educate briefly on each of these points, and I'm going to talk about education for unprecedented times and some things that you may or may not be thinking about, but have been on my mind for years, by the way. In fact, a lot of these were on my mind way before the world changed, before COVID and these kinds of things, but they just happen to have to do with the same things today. Okay, so first one is opportunity. We mentioned the first fear. Do you know, you've probably heard this, but the scores for homeschooling students are way higher. There's absolute opportunity to get into college. In fact, they can do it faster in a lot of cases. If that's important to you, it's really not important to me, college. But if it's important to you, there's no holding back on that at all, right? So you have to ask yourself, though, what is the path you want for your children? If college is in play, it's not a bad thing, but I would just encourage that is a very certain path, something that you would have to have college for to be able to do, like nurse, doctor, lawyer, accountant, these kinds of things that would make more sense for that path. And maybe that is a path for your child, and that's great. Proverbs 1:7 is a powerful verse. Let's see what the Bible says here. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. Okay, so what is the beginning of knowledge then? It's the fear of the Lord. So what is most important in the educational framework for our children is that they are being encouraged in a direction that fears the Lord, that embraces who God is, that becomes biblical in their understanding, that looks through a paradigm of the world through a biblical lens. That doesn't just happen in a Bible study. That doesn't just happen in a few events. That doesn't happen through youth programs. That happens through a coordinated effort of parents, of their education, and church activities, I would say, in conjunction. And so it's so important that we remember, if we're like, I want them to have a great opportunity, I want them to get great knowledge and education so they have great opportunity. Well, you know what? The greatest opportunity is being eternally saved and with God forever in heaven someday. That has to be at the forefront of our minds. And if there's anything that's detracting from that or potentially could hinder that in a major way, then you want to remove that, because that's got to stay priority number one. And in my mind, homeschooling is the greatest way to disciple your children. They're with you and so forth. Doesn't mean they're not doing other things, absolutely. But it's such a great opportunity to instill fearing the Lord, because that's the beginning of knowledge according to the Bible. Okay, socialization, you probably already have overcome this because homeschooling is becoming more mainstream now. But really, you have to ask yourself the question, who do you want your children to be socialized to? And frankly, I want to have influence over that, especially when they're young, and I'm educating and we're teaching them what good friends actually look like through real experience by making sure we're rubbing elbows with families that have children. They're being discipled in a similar way as us, so they're growing up in a way that desire close biblical friendships versus the kind of friendships that usually develop in the public school and other school ways. So I would just encourage you, who do you want them socialized with? I think that the myth that homeschool kids are awkward is pretty much extinct. No, it's just parents. If parents are more awkward, sometimes their kids are more awkward. That's true wherever they go to school, okay? And that's okay. But you know what? You want to love the teenage years. And one of the ways to love the teenage years is to disciple up and spend time with your children and cultivate their character, because you actually have time with them. And It may be your wife that has all that time in the day with them while she's homeschooling, but what an opportunity. And it's so important that your children see you and your wife as the most important teachers in their life, that they respect you in that way. If they don't, it'll be very hard in the teenage years when teachers have more pull than you do. And you really don't want that to be the case, okay, with the agendas in a lot of the school systems. So that's really important. And Proverbs 13:20 says, whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. That is a declarative sentence there in Proverbs, that the companion of fools will suffer harm. You want to make sure that your children do not grow up with a companion of fools who look good when they're around you, but when you're not around, they're up to all kinds of devious things, looking at the wrong things and expose the wrong things, and frankly, be very worldly because they're not being discipled up in the way they should go. And they're rubbing off on your children, and you have less time with your children. This isn't a fear-based thing at all. No fear. I don't fear anything. We never homeschooled based on fear. We homeschooled on practicality of we want our children to turn out in a certain way, and we had a vision for that, and we're seeing that realized, and part of it was because we home educated. And my wife did such an incredible job and is doing an incredible job, and I have some role to play too, but more her, okay? By the way, there's all kinds of bad habits that can happen too when they're socialized, when your children are being socialized to the wrong people. One of the things that I haven't liked about the classroom setting in a traditional sense is everybody's broken up by age. And one of the things that cultivates in that manner is ageism. Usually you think of ageism with the elderly and so forth. Actually, the epidemic of ageism is with children, because what happens is they grow up only wanting to talk to people in their age or older, but not too old, not adults, just a few years older. So right their age or 3 years older. Just think about your past if you grew up in the school system. I know that was true for me. Underclassmen, not interested in talk to my age. And if I could talk to people 1, 2, 3 years older than me, I felt pretty special about that. But adults, not really into it. Is that really the way we want our children to go? I don't think so. And I've seen something completely different in my family where my children love hanging out and spending time and encouraging up younger children. They also love talking to people in their age group, and they also are very good and confident at communicating effectively with adults and enjoy that and enjoy learning from adults. That is what you want. And that doesn't happen by breaking them up by age and putting them in classrooms. Trust me, I've seen it. I'm experienced. I know. Okay. How about the expense of it? Well, could there be any better investment into the minds and soul of your children? I mean, when it has to do with so many more things, when the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, isn't that the best investment you could possibly make? Wouldn't you want to sacrifice other places to pay for some curriculum books? So important, right? Create a budget for homeschooling. It actually isn't all that much. You're going to spend some money, but it's worth it. One of the things I told my wife when we first got married is there's 2 things we're always going to spend money on: quality food and good books, good education. And that was before we decided to homeschool. That was just talking about additional things to their education. I hadn't really thought too much about it at that time. But those 2 things, now we've gone up in finances and to extremely devastating financial situation and all in between. I've experienced it all with a large family. And still, good food, good books. Sometimes we had to be a little more careful about it, but those 2 things are important. Okay? Spend the money. That should not be one of your fears. All right? Less time with your wife. The reality is, actually, you have more flexibility in your world. Actually, there's not as many waiting in lines and taking your kids places for her and all these kinds of errands that happen when they're part of the system, when they're on the system schedule. In fact, you can take a vacation whenever you want because you're not tied to the government schedule, right? So if you want to take a vacation when there's less people out and there's less people traveling, homeschooling is the way to go. I loved it being an entrepreneur. My whole adult life is that we were able to do things and go places whenever we want. We were able to do RV trips that even during the school year and things like that. So important to be able to have that flexibility. I believe I actually have more time with my wife because we homeschool, because of the control of our time and flexibility. How about sports? Well, they can still play sports, absolutely. On sports, though, I would just really caution you to pay attention to the total picture of the fruit from doing sports. Is it separating siblings? Is it causing the whole family to go and focus on one kid and travel and go everywhere for one child, usually the oldest child? Is that building up sibling relationships? I'm all for sports. I think it's fantastic. I don't know if you know this, but my real dad played, was a starter for the team depicted in Remember the Titans, the movie. I went to the premiere and met all the players, and he was an incredible football player. That's one of the things that I enjoy knowing about my father, since I never actually met him. But I think it's pretty cool. And, they did break up fights in the hallways and these kinds of things during the racial tensions and all those things. I think that's incredible. But you know what? Sports isn't the end all be all. It's very good. In fact, you know what? 2 of my kids are playing football on the high school team for the first time right now. But you know what? It's not overboard. It's not traveling on weekends and missing Sundays. It's done in a way that's doable, where we can all be more participative. And there's 2 brothers doing it together. And next year there'll be 3 doing it together if they keep doing it. So I like that much better. Find ways to do things where you can be together and make family the priority versus tugging everybody for one kid everywhere. That's just something to think about. Okay, what's the overall fruit of that? Now, how about stigma of being a homeschool family? You know what? I'm not a conforming person. I'm not a people pleaser, and I encourage you not to be either. You never sacrifice doing what's best because of the opinions of others. Just don't do it. I don't think anybody likes to admit that, but deep down you might be going, oh, my extended family are going to think this, they're going to question this, all these kinds of things. Hey, brother, we decided to homeschool, I don't know, it's been 19 years, maybe 17 years ago, probably 17 years ago. Things were way different. It was not a popular thing to do back then. Trust me, we got hounded by people for homeschooling. And today, it's much less of an environment where people are against it. A lot of people are for it. But who cares about stigma? Who cares? Be courageous. Be resolute. Be a resolute man. Resolute men don't care about stigma for doing right decisions. Hey, gents, maybe this fits you, maybe it doesn't. But one thing is true. Misapplied ambition is costly, and a thriving family is priceless. Let me ask you, are you successful? Yet feeling a growing defeat inside, perhaps a deep yearning for more, for what really matters? At what point in the journey did we decide to make silent agreements to put aside what matters most? Perhaps it's the old myth of once I accomplish this, then I'll focus on my callings, then I'll focus on my family and my faith. Well, too many men have traded real excellence for the deceiving picture culture pressures them to pursue. It's actually possible to have it all, but it must be redefined if you want real excellence. See, you have to be willing to stand against the wind of mediocrity pressing against you that most call normal, a mediocrity usually embraced by Christian circles around you too. See, almost all successful Christian men have found themselves suffocating from their own reality, even when many around them are calling them blessed. There is no success at the sacrifice of your faith, family, and callings in your life. So if you're interested in finding out how we can work together, if you want help, if you're serious about growth, go to resoluteman.com and schedule a call. In fact, let me tell you a story. Right at the beginning, our first homeschool conference we go to, we just decided to homeschool. We're going to learn. We don't know anything. My wife has all kinds of, fears that are normal if you've never done something like that before. But one thing I said is, Ange, I married you, not, this. And what I meant by that, and I wasn't trying to be disrespectful, I probably was a little prideful back then. I was young, entrepreneur, successful, and, we dressed very normal, right? My wife wore jeans, for example, and these kinds of things. And I just was encouraging her that she wasn't to be wearing the denim jumpers because we're joining a homeschool community. Now, I think that's, less of a thing these days. And by the way, nothing against how anybody dresses. I'm just telling you a story, honestly, of where I was at back then. But we did bring on the homeschooling fully, but we weren't conforming to every way homeschoolers were. necessarily. That doesn't need to be the case at all. So, in fact, homeschoolers today come in all kinds of pictures. And you know what's interesting? Even non-believers in the droves are homeschooling their children now. It's becoming a main thing that's smart. Okay, want to be well-rounded. You know what? You get to help your children be the most well-rounded because you're the principal. Did you think about that? You're actually the principal. And you get to help make decisions. You get to think about, what do I want my kids to know? What do unprecedented times call for my children to know more of? What's going to be important? The agenda of the public schools is so rotten. Marxism, right? Communism, right? To worldliness, to gender confusion, to teaching the wrong things you don't want them to teach, to exposure to everything worldly and normalization of sin, to false history, books that teach actually inaccuracies. And then you don't have the time with them. They're trusting their teachers and peers more than you going into middle school, starting in the teenage years. And you might have their heart being their parents, but you don't have their heart in terms of teaching them things anymore because other people have their hearts that are very worldly minded. There's a huge agenda against your children, against a biblical context, and against conservatism that you want to be aware of. Do you realize half of the population of young people believe socialism is a great idea? What in the world? That only can be from the education system, and there's proof that is, in fact, from the education system. I want to share a scripture with you that I think is super powerful. 1 Corinthians 15:33. It says, "Do not be deceived. Bad company ruins good morals." Bad company ruins good morals. I want them to be well-rounded. I want them to understand different perspectives. I want them to learn from other people's, culture and history and these kinds of things. Hey, some of that's cool, but not in the education system where they're corralled together and the teachers that you're saying, respect them, they're your authority, be like them, learn from them. That is subconsciously what you're telling your children when you put them in front of them, isn't it? And they're the leaders, and then the peers are reinforcing it. Talk about a disaster. Why would you want that? Okay? If you want your children to just turn out a certain way, they're not becoming well-rounded. They're becoming indoctrinated with worldliness. So I would not side with that at all. How about your social circle? I would just say that's selfish if you're worried about losing friends or concerned about not being around the same meetings and things that are circling around the school system and so forth. I would say that's just not important at all. That is irrelevant, and we need to not think about that. If you are not still friends with people after you make a change in this decision and you're still trying to be friends with them, then they weren't really friends anyways. It was just surface relationships talking about sports or whatever, and it wasn't real. If they are real relationships, you'll keep the relationships even when you make that change. Okay, so I'm going to give you a few things. I hope that was helpful. That's some of my fears, and what I've seen is the truth about them. Okay, education for unprecedented times. What is important today for your children to really grasp? AI is taking over in a lot of ways. It's going to become probably in some ways smarter than humans at some point. Not always. I think it's impossible for it to be always, but there's certain things that just won't be important anymore for humans to do. I'll give you an example of something. So why do children need to understand how to be great writers when AI can just write better for humans? I wouldn't say we're at a point where AI can write better than humans, but I would say we're going there quickly. And so what's the importance then of creative writing and ability to write? I would say it's even more important. It is essential. In fact, I don't want my children to rely on AI tools to write for them. It's so important that they work the muscle to use their brain. It is helping their brain when they're making connections and they're writing creatively, they're writing critically, they're writing letters, they're writing papers and so forth. Don't lose the art of writing. So many will lose it. It's going to be a lost art in society because over-reliance of technology. So one of the key things for your children is differentiation. Well, how do you make sure your children are differentiated in a world that's becoming more homogenized? right? You think of homogenized milk. Why do they call it that? Because it's mixed through, so all the elements are so the same that it's this product that you always expect, which is just the exact same color milk, everything. I might have got that definition wrong on milk, but if I did, you still get the point. And the point is, you do not want a homogenized society. You want people, your children, to be who God made them to be, following after God, standing firm in the faith, loving other people well, but not at the compromise of their convictions and what is actually true, not your truth, but the truth that's in the Bible, and defending that and reaching out in his name and doing things with their life that provide and take care of family in the way that they're called to. So that's what we want, right? So how do you differentiate your children in a way? Well, being able to write well is differentiation, in my opinion, because it contributes also to how they think. And thinking is going to be key. The ability to critically think, to understand and decipher what's true and not true that society is spitting out, to have such a strong biblical worldview that they can decipher what's false and what's true when AI is manipulating things. Hey, right now, Kamala Harris has AI manipulating crowd size, and even if there's a crowd, right? Some things she's getting off a plane and there's no crowd at all, and they're using AI to put a huge crowd in front of her, right? And some of them have 3 arms and eyes going different directions and things like that. So, that AI is going to get so good that pretty soon you won't be able to tell the difference. So critical thinking, really helping your children understand what they're seeing may not be true and these kinds of things. Well, writing helps with that. Oration, I think, is going to be vital. The ability to communicate and to speak, publicly speak, and to be convincing and share your thoughts and share your opinions strongly. I think that is going to be super important. Entrepreneurship is important. Even if you're not an entrepreneur, you may need to exercise that muscle a little bit with a side gig just to be able to teach your children. Or there's courses, there's people, you can get coached. I can coach you, right, on some things. But it's important to equip your children and have them experience making a profit while they're young, and equip them in that way is so important. I think it's going to get harder and harder and harder for Christians to work for a company in the future. Just look at what happened with COVID. That was just a test drive. So I think it's important to look at the trends. It's not fear. It's just looking at the trends. Look at what already happened. Learn from it. Equip your family. Be ready for things. Make sure you're equipping them in the right direction. These kinds of things, okay? Multi-skilled, I think, is essential. Resiliency is vital. The ability to for your children to provide in ways that come from multiple sources, because there may be instability in the future, and one of those sources dries up. They have 2 more they can focus on, and while they're building a 3rd one again. I think 3 sources of income is vital for every family, and you want to be equipping your kids. So my argument is that you need more time with your children to be able to do that. Even if it's the mom, because you're working hard, spending more time with them to do that, it's vital. You need to really equip your children. These are unprecedented times. And the reason it's unprecedented times, we recently, on our email list, make sure you're on it, we emailed 8 reasons why technology makes these unprecedented times versus any other times in history for parents. And it's irrefutable. Never before have these 8 things been possible and happening that are challenging for parenting. Now, I'm not anti-tech. I'm actually super for technology. I love technology. I use it every day. We wouldn't be able to do this right now without technology. It's incredible, right? Impacting, I think the ministry is going to impact, I hope, 2 million people this year, but it may come short of that, but it's going to be way over 1 million. And I'm so thankful for that. Well, praise the Lord that we use technology to impact 194 countries with positive Christian resources and messaging. That is incredible. And so I am for technology, but we do have to understand how that changes things and what that can expose our children to, and what that's doing to peers, what that's doing to extended family, where there might need to be boundaries, what that's doing in the education system, and what that's doing for future jobs for children when they're adults, and those jobs may not be there. Half the jobs will be replaced. It's just a fascinating time we're living in. And so I want you to think about that. So your wife wants to homeschool. Well, I would highly encourage you to support her And by the way, if you want to support her, we have a homeschooling blueprint, just came to my mind, that is so good if you're thinking about homeschooling and want really clear direction on creating a custom blueprint for the uniqueness of your kids and your family. Or if you've been homeschooling, but you want to amp it up a level and really thrive and get motivated on doing this in even a better way. I'm in there in one of the videos. It's my wife and most of them. 6 hours plus 45 page blueprint. And it's really about cultivating your own plan and your own blueprint and leveling up what you already have. So you can get that at becourageousministry.org. Just hit courses. But anyways, I so appreciate you joining the podcast, and please share it.